Hello, you're listening to Thinking Social and Solidarity Economy, an online series of presentations and discussions that brings you the people and the ideas that are defining how we understand more just and humane alternatives to social and economic life. Recorded at a live in-person event in 2023, in this episode we bring you the very first Jack Quarter Lecture on Social Economy, organized by the Centre for Learning Social Economy and Work at the University of Toronto. It features Rutgers University professor Priscilla Ferreira in a talk entitled Popular Education and the Economics of Abolition.
So welcome to the inaugural Jack Quarter Lectureship on the social economy. Before we begin, I wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. My name is Marcelo Vieta, and I'm Associate Professor in Adult Education and Community Development and Director of the Centre for Learning, Social Economy and Work here at Boise, University of Toronto. On behalf of the Centre for Learning, Social Economy and Work, Rousseau, CSI, and two other associations that had their conferences earlier on this week at Congress, the Canadian Association for Studies in Cooperation and the Association for Nonprofit and Social Economy Research, I am honored to initiate today the inaugural Jack Quarter Lectureship on the Social Economy. And I also want to warmly welcome and thank the first Jack Quarter Social Economy lecturer, Professor Priscilla Ferreira, who so readily and kindly agreed to come and speak to us during her research leave in Brazil. So first, before Priscilla comes up, allow me to say a few words about the lectureship. The Jack Quarter Lectureship on the Social Economy is in memory and honor of Professor Jack Quarter, who passed away in early 2019 as full professor in the Adult Education and Community Development Program here at Boise. For over 50 years, all of them, by the way, at Boise, Jack was a friend and colleague to many in the fields of adult education, community development, and the social economy. And it's so great to see many of you, many of Jack's friends and colleagues here today. A renowned researcher, prolific writer, and much loved teacher, Jack mentored hundreds, if not thousands, of Canadians and others from around the world studying or involved in the social and solidarity economy. Jack helped co-found several groups that many of you here today belong to, such as the Canadian Worker Cooperative Federation, the Canadian Association for Studies in Cooperation, the Association for Nonprofit and Social Economy Research, and its journal, the Canadian Journal of Nonprofit and Social Economy Research. Jack was also one of the research leads of the Cross Canada Multi-Year and Multi-Site Social Economy Hub initiative, which helped conceptualize and map the social economy in Canada. He wrote or co-wrote dozens of books, you can see here, and articles on the social economy, workplace and economic democracy, and labor issues, including co-authoring the much-used Understanding the Social Economy, a Canadian Perspective, and Understanding the Social Economy of the United States. Before his passing, Jack was also the finalist for the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada's Impact Award, recognizing the highest achievements in social sciences and humanities research, knowledge mobilization, and scholarship supported by SSHRC. The Jack Quarter Lectureship is cared for and organized by the Centre for Learning, Social Economy and Work, which Jack, by the way, helped co-found with us, and is generally made possible by a donation from another renowned scholar of Canada's cooperatives and the social economy, University of Calgary Emeritus Professor George Melnick. The pandemic kept us from hosting the Jack Quarter Lectureship earlier. We thank Professor Melnick for his kind donation and patience. Professor Melnick only had one stipulation for how to use the funds for the lectureship: host it at Boise. Host it at Boise to keep Jack's memory present. We are thankful to CSI, its board, and the conference organizers for their enthusiastic support in holding the first Jack Quarter Lectureship during this conference. And I also want to extend many thanks to Clouseau graduate assistant Delania Segretti in the back for helping us organize tonight. So we will be holding a reception right after today's lectureship in the Nexus Lounge on the 12th floor. So don't go away. There's lots of food there, and we'll celebrate and be together. So without further ado, it is also my pleasure to ask Tema Pinkowski to come and introduce Professor Ferreira. Tema is an AECD PhD student, solidarity economy practitioner, and the first, can't read my writing, and theorist and community activist. One of our brilliant PhDs, Tema is also recipient of the 2022 Jack Porter Prize on the Social Economy. Tema?
Hi, everyone. I am very happy to be introducing the inaugural Jack Porter Lecture on the Social Economy here today at the CASI Conference, Professor Priscilla Ferreira. Dr. Ferreira's talk is entitled Popular Education and the Economics of Abolition. Dr. Ferreira is an Afro-Brazilian feminist, abolitionist, and social justice educator. She is also assistant professor of geography and Latinx and Caribbean studies at Rutgers University. Dr. Ferreira's work and activism focus on Black and solidarity economies, Black geographies, and community-engaged pedagogies in scholarship. Dr. Ferreira has been organizing with communities of color inside and outside of academia over the past 20 years and collaborated in several popular education projects internationally. They are the coordinator of the English and Social Justice School, a language justice Black co-op that offers language training, interpretation, and translation services for social movements and creates opportunities for international education and political collaboration for and with Black grassroots activists, scholars, and artists. Dr. Ferreira is also a board member of Collective Diaspora, a new membership-based organization of Black cooperatives and Black-led co-op support organizations from across the African diaspora. Dr. Ferreira's recent publications include a critique of white centrism and epistemic injustice in solidarity economy movements in the Journal of Geoforum, experiential narratives of Black feminist research methodologies in Women's Studies Quarterly, and a co-authored book in Portuguese, Pia Lucina of Fabulous City of Goddesses, the political biography of community organizer, forthcoming in 2020. I'd now like to ask the 2023 inaugural Jack Porter Lecturer on the Social Economy, Dr. Priscilla Ferreira, to the podium. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Boa noite, todos os brasileiros da casa. Wow, it's such a pleasure to be here tonight, and I feel very honored to have been invited to do the inaugural Jack Porter Lecture on Social Economy at OIS, and I want to thank the co-organizers, Daria Tarhan, Jennifer Sumner, Dr. Katie Integer, and Lance McGreedy, and also Marcelo Vieta for the invitation. And also I'd like to thank Delania Segretti for supporting and assisting organizing my trip here from Rio de Janeiro. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. I honor and I thank the native peoples of this land, and I ask permission to stand here as a humble guest tonight. I also want to honor and thank my ancestors, and I have in my heart right now the memory and the presence of my grandmother, Damiana Pinto, who was a landless campesino organizing with the Theology of Liberation movement, and whose life was touched by the Freirian adult education movement. And she started the first grade when she was 54, and made it through started first grade at the age of 54 and made it through fourth grade, which was the minimum educational degree requirement to run for offices. So she was one of the first city council officers of the merging working party in the 80s, in the first elections in the office in Brazil. So this I offer to my grandmother, and also, of course, to Professor Jack Porter, who trusted and walked alongside the people. I'm gonna read for 10 minutes, just to get some of the ideas conveyed, and then I'm going to talk about three popular education initiatives that I have been a part of. And I chose these three because they happen at different stages of my educational career. So the first one as an undergrad, the second one as a grad student, and now more recently as a professor. I feel it's I think, and I organize at the intersection of multiple identities. I am a queer, Afro-Latina, Afro-Brazilian immigrant living in the United States. I come from a working class, interracial family who taught me from a very young age the foundations of community economies, self-defense, and autonomy. These principles have held and guided me from my childhood through my adult life, while I've had to struggle, sometimes literally fist fight, as I learned to navigate elitist, majority, white educational spaces throughout my entire life. My Black elders and community mentors and political comrades, especially the women, have taught me how to acknowledge and honor Black brilliance, while developing tools to speak uncomfortable truths with respect and compassion when I need to speak up against injustice that challenge my people's very existence. Today, I hold a so-called privileged position as a tenure-track assistant professor at a public research university in the United States. An institutional hostility is felt and clear. The fact of underrepresentation and over-policing of the social identities I embody within what I call the intellectual industrial complex require more than being an assistant professor. In fact, to survive and thrive within academia, I must be more than an assistant professor. I must be an insistent professor. And I insist that learning is selective, it is relational, it should be valued and supported regardless of how much resources, how many degrees, grants, endowments, visibility that the neoliberal paradigm of formal education is willing to acknowledge or hold faithful. Heartening this kind of commitment with community engaged education and research takes boldness, trust, patience, and risks. And it also takes resources. So two key questions for those of us interested in truly committed community engaged work and scholarship are, where are the resources and how can I redistribute them? The university is part of a global value chain of knowledge production. Under the dictates of racial capitalist regime, the intellectual industrial complex most often functions to capture knowledge and turn knowledge producers into intellectual captives within boundaries of discipline and institutional traps. Epistemic surveillance disproportionately constrains the students and faculty of color who are asked to meet the same meritocratic standards as members of privileged community within academia, while we must also reach such levels of excellence while dodging bullets to protect our creative, our leisure, and our organizing time, and safeguard our emotional and our intellectual resources. Abolitionist organizers and scholars such as Mayers and Mariam Kaba have examined the nexus between education and the prison industrial complex, particularly the relationship between schools and jails, what is known as the school to prison pipeline. They have demonstrated the linkages were not just physical in terms of how school buildings resembles prisons, but also how pedagogies can replicate and reinforce the idea of youth of color as potential public enemies, inherently violent and prone to crime, potential super predators to be kept under surveillance with metal detectors, school uniforms, and armed security guards. The nexus between higher education and the military prison industrial complex, however, has not been as much explored as the school to prison pipeline. Scholars like Ferreira discuss the relationship between university, urban redevelopment planning, policing, the displacement of communities of color, and he critiques the real state grab and the speculative style branding of the modern universities, like must we say Toronto, like others. The variant contends that, quote, we must no longer evaluate colleges and universities simply by their stated aim of knowledge production and dissemination. They have, quote, become rapacious, pro-growth behemoths that discuss students as consumers, alumni as shareholders, and the world beyond campus walls as either real prime state or a dangerous threat to their brand. And he also asked a crucial question: has the very notion of the public good been perverted when it is used to justify multi-million-dollar tax-exempt endowments, an enormous contingent of low-wage labor force, and the elimination of affordable housing in neighborhoods around campuses, as well as increased racial profiling, end quote. Besides its microeconomic roles in urban economies of redevelopment and surveillance, within the very walls of the university, its community also endures the policing of the full expression of human creativity and human experience in ways that constrain and punish in explicit and implicit ways, non-traditional, non-white, non-Anglocentric, undocumented, Black, Indigenous, intuitive, and neurodivergent forms of knowledge. Epistemic surveillance and epistemicide, the killing of knowledge, as a power mechanism to concentrate visibility, power, and resources in the heteropatriarchal, white-centric, and global north zones of the global intellectual value chain, creates what Barry's called organizational containment. Organizational containment is especially experienced by those of us who intend to collectivize university resources, visibility, and reward. Eatman and all have averted that, quote, institutions of higher education have typically lagged behind in supporting and rewarding collectivizing approaches. Academic disciplines continue to uphold disconnected or so-called peer forms of research and are suspect of community-engaged scholarship. Tenure and promotion guidelines reward traditional research while counting public engaged research as merely community or public service and not scholarship, end quote. For instance, single authorship is valued over co-authorship in tenure and promotion assessment in ways that reinforce a discouraging message that collective and shared knowledge is not assessed in equal footing with individual, and I would say privatized knowledge. Even in instances when the result of such single author publications might just as well be from intellectual extractivism, from surveys, clinical interventions, mapping, ethnographies of disenfranchised communities. Implicit in such political economy of knowledge production are the assumptions that individuals merit compensation for their individual efforts in their education and career path, as if there could be such a thing as individual effort and knowledge. All knowledge is collective, and all individuals aren't but unique carriers of knowledge from collectivities and communities, be it parents, peers, collaborators, colleagues, or co-organizers. Scholars who claim to be, we hear a lot about these days about public-facing scholarship. I don't know here in Canada, but in the US a lot. And I always like to mark the difference between, public-facing scholarship and community-engaged scholarship. Public-facing, if you intervene in Twitter commentaries, if you write reports to, the World Bank or anything beyond the walls of academia, might as well be called public-facing scholarship, and that's what I've been hearing. And I think that's very different from committed community-engaged scholarship. So should scholars who claim to be doing community-engaged work should carefully and intentionally reflect on what is it that is reciprocal, equitable engagement between thinkers, organizers, working across the power and resource differential of distinct regimes and spaces of knowledge production. Merely naming oneself public-facing scholar may lead to the risk of underrating the personal, professional, and financial challenges that doing intentional resource sharing with community requires. While public-facing as potential publicity for the university is increasingly encouraged and even well compensated in the competitive and celebrity showbiz of the academic industry, true commitment of time and resource distribution to communities of collaborators beyond the confines of the university wall and brand are prone to be boycotted, marginalized, or punished in the mainstream metrics of tenure and promotion. How then can collective conditions be built into scholarship? The tripod of reading, writing, and teaching needs to be exploded so as to reconstruct scholarship as a wide array of modalities through which a renewed and diverse breed of scholars could operate. This does not equate to disregarding traditional or disciplinary ways of undertaking scholarship, but it calls for a process of radical restructuring and exercising redistributive economics in knowledge production in order for collective conditions to be built into scholarship. In other words, emancipatory learning and organizing, emancipatory scholarship requires abolitionist economics of knowledge production, knowledge sharing, and of compensation and rewarding knowledge of all nature, time, and geographies. For that, it's necessary that we put an emphasis on process rather than merely on final deliverables. In other words, engage in a kind of scholarship in which, should a standard deliverable not come into fruition, like a book not published or a paper rejected, still there is a socially relevant intervention embedded in the process that remains. A play stage, a poster campaign, a documentary, relationship of love and trust and respect that wasn't there before. And the lived experience remains not only for the benefit of the researcher, but in the collective memory of a constituent. A community-engaged scholarship would demand a very different set of strategies if aiming for different outcomes, and that includes solidarity, redistributive economics. I also call that the economics of abolition. The operational question is whether those situating themselves as engaged scholars have developed or rediscovered tactics, methods, and team assemblages to understand and act differently. Can community-engaged scholarship in this time of increasing neoliberalization of universities resist and create more collaborative projects within the current system? So now I turn to 3 different initiatives that I have engaged as, trying to bridge the discrepancy and the distance and the disregard between academic institutions and popular education projects. The first one here it was a college prep, college exam prep at the University of São Paulo. If you don't know too much about about how Brazilian educational system works, it has historically been the fact that public higher education, people don't pay tuition to go there. Can you imagine a tuition-free public university? Okay, so that means that absolutely it is not accessible to everybody, right? So what happens is that the middle class pay for private schooling for their children their entire lives through high school so that they can be prepared to take the college exam prep. So the college exam prep is the funnel, is the channel through which the Brazilian controlling elite emerges. So what we undertook as a undergrad, in fact, I was in my first year. That project had been there for maybe 2 or 3 years when I started, and fellows occupied the building of psychology, which was underused in the evening. And they just occupied the building and said, we are going to practice what we learn in class here in service of the communities that we come from or with whom we care, about whom we care. And so we are from different disciplines, right? Sociology, history, economics. And so we are teaching math, chemistry, physics, English, you name it, all that were the discipline requirements for the exam. And the project was absolutely self-sustained and self-managed. And we had about 500 students every year. And they would come to study with us. We were teaching them as undergrads. These were public school students and also working adults. And they would come to study with us from 7 p.m. through 11 p.m., 5 days a week. And they would pay a minimum monthly fee. Say right now it would be something like $20 a month. But the way that it was organized, that it had an entire collective structure of governance. The students participated in making the budgetary decisions, in organizing the pedagogical material. And we had actually a very high rate of acceptance in public university, which was 20% at the time. But what was most important here is that this is not an isolated experience. From the 80s and particularly in the 90s, pre-exam colleges or institutions emerged all over the country, particularly pushed by the Black movement. And the reason for that is that when I went to the University of São Paulo and I started my undergrad in 2003, the Black population in the state of São Paulo was 47% of the population. But in the University of São Paulo, which is the most prestigious, sought after, highly absolutely competitive university, tuition-free university, we were only 1.3 Black student body in a state that has 47% of Black people. And so at that time, this movement was spreading all over the country and also pushed by the Black movement with demands for affirmative actions. So we knew that it would take very long until that could happen, but we were marching, we were occupying buildings, and we were organizing college preps in the slums, in the favelas, everywhere, and they're all solidarity economy organized. At the time, I didn't have a language for that. It wasn't until I met Gibson Graham's framework of diverse language for economics that I was like, wait a minute, that's what we do. Because I thought I was just a militant student. I didn't think of myself as an economic agent. I didn't think of myself as queer in capitalism. I didn't think of myself as building community economies, but we knew something. And we knew that not all of our students would be accepted in public university. So we made the space to be, a space of life struggle. Just like I was saying, if no final deliverable, in this case, getting into colleges, happens, there's this life experience that stayed and transformed and taken away by the constituency who are a part of a project that they feel are political members of. So there is so much love in this project. This is how I have become a political subject in the first place. All of I have students from 20 years ago. We are almost the same age. I have some older students, but many of our students, some came from, from youth detention centers. Some of them were homeless. And with time and the way that students organize, some of them would be like hairdresser. If another student couldn't pay, they would do a lottery of hairdressing services and then donate to the project. When we are in a crisis, because the university said we couldn't charge for educational services, which was a trick because foundations were charging. So there was a law that no longer nobody could charge. But we weren't the foundations, but they came after us. And the students got together and organized all kinds of barter schemes, including producing CDs and selling and giving it to the project. And at the end of the year, we were able to pay back all the teachers and all the staff 3 months of late monthly payments after just gathering the student in what we call the arena project and explaining what the project was about, how we could and should organize it economically in a different way. And we had, even extra cash to rent a weekend in a farm and do the student forum there. I mean, that's where the picture came from. And now, I have colleagues of mine who have PhDs in sociology, just like me, who are my colleagues and, used to be youth from detention centers that had scholarship and studied with us. The project is still existing. And today, I am very, very proud to say that I'm a member of a generation who has drastically changed. The University of São Paulo was forced to adopt affirmative actions in 2012. And now we are 51% of people from public schools at USP, and we are about 32% of Black people in that student body. These are all the ancestors. Now I'll turn to another praxis of popular education now as a grad student doing my dissertation work in Brazil, particularly in favela City of God. That was 2000. Whoa, it's not. Has anyone here seen the film City of God? Few of you. Okay, so City of God is a film that many community members, it was nominated for the Oscar in 2002, and many community members of Favela City of God have very harsh critiques against the movie, especially mothers, because of the way it portrayed the community as mainly, solely a community of merciless youth gangs. When I went to do my dissertation work in Favela City of God, I was actually interested in trying to understand this phenomenon, which was Solidarity Economy Bank in Favela City of God. And they were printing their own currency. So this lady here, she's a priestess of Candomblé. and the community members decided that she was an important figure and printed her face to represent their wealth in their currency. And I was like, community bank in a favela? How come is that? And so, at the time I had such a burnout from organizing Black students and all of that. And I was like, I want to leave the race thing, aside. I want to study development, something to take a break. And then I go to Favela City of God and I go to the community bank and it's all Black women. And I'm like, okay, here we go again. And I was like, how did this even come about? And so I can say more about how this works, but the thing I wanted to share about community engaged in this particular work this is the current mayor of Rio. He was also the mayor of Rio in 2012. And then, you know, I met Lucinha. The first time I went there, I met Lucinha. Where is she? Here. This one. Tia Lucinha. And she was the president of the Solidarity Economy Bank at the time. And, you know, and I met her and I was like, you know, I'm coming, you know, to do some research. And like, it was my first time in Favela City of God. And so she was like, okay, I'll give you, you know, a couple minutes. Talk to me. And then she gathered a whole bunch of women and they were like, what are you doing here? What do you want from us? Why are you here? What do you have to offer? Can we trust you? And then it was I had an interview with them. They interviewed me for like 5 hours until they could get a picture of what the heck I was doing there. And they said, well, at the end, she said, you know, I really like your story and I really like what you're trying to do here. But you know what? You're a researcher, right? I'm like, yeah. So you must know how to write. I'm like, apparently. And she's like, you know, a whole bunch of people like you have come through here. I have given interviews. I have, given interviews. People take pictures, they leave, they disappear. Everything is spread, they never come back. You know, journalists. So she's like, I've been an organizer in this community for 40 years. I've never made money out of it, but I would like to leave a legacy, and I would like for my grandchildren to be able to know what I have done for this community. Would you want to write a book about my life? That's the book that's forthcoming next month. We co-authored this book, and I said, no, at the time I said, no, actually, I don't know how to write a book. I was a graduate. And she's like, can we try? And so we started doing interviews about her life, and I learned that Tia Lucinha used together with a whole bunch of women, and that she had been a member of one of the first families forcefully displaced from favelas in the gentrifying touristic place in Rio to what is become Favela City of God. At the time, it was an urban project, unfinished, no sewage, no schools, no roads, no public transportation. Her mother and her parents were displaced there. First, they were taken to Stadium Maracanã, where they stayed for 6 months, and then to that favela. And if you have seen the film City of God, it ends with a new generation of children holding guns and things, right? So her brother became the next drug dealer in command of that generation for 10 years. She lost that brother, another brother, 2 nephews, and a brother-in-law. And then in the book, she said, I also lost, it was 6 assassinations because my mom also died of a heart attack. Because these people are, our people were killed just by our house, almost in the same way so that we could hear from inside the house. And she said, I have watched my brother grow. My mom had to go back and pay out of pocket her transportation to go back all the way across the city where she had to take care of white children, white children, and left her children in the house. And so as they were growing up, my brother, like other youth, were exposed to a new community where there was no relationship or trust because they just, dumped a whole bunch of people from everywhere in there. And we had to tend to ourselves. And so she created the first community child care center in Favela City of God, which remains to this day. It's never had a grant. It's never had governmental support. In fact, they occupied an abandoned building that was supposed to be a preschool, a community childcare, and they have been running that public community childcare on their own, with their own resources, now for 30-something years. And so the story that I'm telling here, I have about 5 minutes here to go. But the story that I wanted to share here is, she said, I don't want this to happen to anybody, but I never also thought of myself as necessarily an economic agent. So, even when she was the president of the Bank of Solidarity Economy, people came to do capacity building, and she was like, what is that? And then when she realized that solidarity economy is what that community had been doing forever, right? So then again, the power of naming the language. This book, which is a co-authorship with Lucian, and this is just a snippet of her story. It's an amazing story. It's called City of Goddesses, a political biography of a community organizer. We made a purpose to make that book be co-authored. It has a lot of her oral voice, but she also edited and co-edited with me many times over Zoom. It's been going on for almost 6 years now because she had to choose all of the researcher, all of the people who she wanted to speak about her life. Yeah, it's gonna be launched. But to her, it was really important to just like name herself. I'm a community researcher. I'm like, absolutely. And now a writer, absolutely. And when we talk about economics of abolition, where are the resources? So for this particular book, I had to make a choice. If I wanted it to be sort of my tenure track book, I wouldn't have co-authored with her. I wouldn't have published in Portuguese. We wouldn't have gone with an independent press. Now I used my research fund to pay for the production of this. We had our own peer review, and it's gonna be published by an independent press, and all the revenue is gonna go for her and for the organization, which might not change her life forever, certainly won't, but it means a lot. So what stays as deliverable? What means is the process is what I mean. I don't have much time, but I wanted to just say quickly, that's Community City of Goddesses. Each one of these women have stories that could be a book each. I think the last one I want to talk about now as a professor is the Black community geography, Black geography gathering, which happened in Rio last year. Organizing gatherings where conferences consider the state of communities as sites of knowledge production from the US institutional mentality, that's very hard to do. Even now, I'm organizing the same conference in August, and the funding should not be spent in New York City when they're going to meet with other grassroots organizations, because it's gotta be what happens within Rutgers. Like, I can't tell you how many hours of my first year when I should be writing, I was filling out forms, W8, W9, all the text forms, translating, educating Western Union staff members, educating all across the working chain of the university. Admin work, I was doing full-time admin work when I could and should have been publishing to make this happen. But these were people with whom I had relationships throughout 7 years. And it was time for us to come together and meet not only on their site, but also on my site now, and they're coming in October. But we went to places like Terreiro de Candomblé, Mãe Beata. This is, Terreiro de Candomblé, Mãe Beata. We know that and the conference or the gathering is around 4 axes: Black ecology, Black economy, and abolition. So we went to all of these different community spaces. This is a very, very important terreiro of Candomblé, Afro-Brazilian religion. We convene in circle. We listen to the priestess of the house. She tells us about how she doesn't have how he doesn't have a medicine degree, but attends to all the healthcare in that community, communities who are at risk and at actual exposure to militias. Evangelical supported militias attacking Afro-Brazilian religions. So going to these spaces and naming them as a space of knowledge against the entire grain of like all the barriers for that not to happen. The day this conference gathered about 80 people every day with food, transportation, 30% of them lodging, even international flights. The day the conference started, the money had not come from Rutgers. The money wasn't still there. How did this happen? 4 days. We went to the MST, the Landless Peasant Movement. We went to the MST, the Landless Peasant Movement. We went to Ferreira de Candomblé. We went to Favela da Maré. How did that happen? I had some savings. The first time I had ever savings from after grad school, and I had to put what I had to make that happen. Of course, it wasn't enough. So my people held this down. My people held this down, and this only happened because relationship of trust and knowledge and acknowledgement has been built over time. Now, if I am frightened by the publish or perish fear mentality, I won't be doing that. Because I already feel the whip coming through. Like you're supposed to be publishing at least one paper every semester, right? In another language, yes? So that's why I say community engaged scholarship takes boldness. It takes patience and it takes risk. So we can't allow people who are not doing that, say they're public facing, whatever, and get celebrity money out of the industry. That's not fair. We should be very serious anytime we say community engaged work because people's lives are at stake inside and outside academia. I will just end with, these are maroon women fighting the Navy who have occupied the collectively titled land, maroon land in Bahia. 9 of them are coming to the United States to the Black Geography Gathering. Molha o pé, mas não molha a meia. Embala. Come on, guys. Molha o pé, mas não molha a meia. Eu venho de 3 lagoas fazer barulho na terra alheia. Eu venho de 3 lagoas fazer barulho na terra alheia. Axé to the campesinos of the MST who hold us down with their tremendous amount of work against the militias, against the mayor, against everything. So this is the space of learning. There are 80 of us there. All of the money that came was to buy them infrastructure. When we leave the places where we do research, we need to leave stuff. All this conversation about, oh, we need to give back to the community. If we don't extract, if we don't take away, we ain't got nothing to give back. It's there. You know what I'm saying? It's there. So that's a calling. I feel this room, there's a lot of people who do this kind of work. And I think that we need to have more and more ties for international solidarity in this regard. And, you know, what do these communities, what do all of these projects have in common? And what they have in common are popular education at work, cooperativism at work, abolition economics, because this place is for all of us. And so are other places. But to go to Favela City of God, you need to cross across war things. I mean war things. 10 a.m. Black populations in majority Black territories as a state enemy. I mean the army in those favelas. City of God does not have one high school, public high school. 70,000 people live there, half of which are youth. So anytime that we hear that Black people's brilliance is being trumped by anti-Black violence, we need to remember that. That against the fact that someone had her brother become internationally known as a youth who did not have the same opportunity. She mobilized all that she had to create a child care center that still exists. And this is in honor and love and respect for Tia Lucia of City of Goddesses. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Take one more. It's so resonating with what we talked about. One of the perhaps say a bit more about the work in terms of the integration of dimension. I guess I'll go with these two first. Thank you for this great, great question. Alisa Frost, I want to say send love and shout out to Nicole Boros, who was doing all the go for her. Thank you. Abolition, woo. I mean, over like the past, I'll say 5 years, and especially at least in the US, since George Floyd, a brutal assassination, there's been a lot of organizing with the calling to defund the police and abolish the prison, the military prison industrial complex. So abolish prison and defund the police. There is in Black study and Black organizing a long tradition of demonstrating and explaining the simultaneous, I don't know if that's the word, but the origins of policing in slave patrolling. So not just the institution of the police and the institution of slavery merging together, but they also say that it's not just about ending, it's not just about the bricks and mortars, just ending the buildings, right? It's about understanding that it is a call to end the police by defunding and re-diverting the funds to community-based forms of economics like this one. if I could, I don't have the numbers, but the only presence of the state, not the only presence, but the overwhelming presence of the state in Favela City of God are police cars, guns, and war cars. War cars. How much does that cost? And they're working in an occupied building of a child care center. Public, abandoned, no high school. So when we say defund the police, the abolitionist movement is saying abolish prison, dismantle the system. And it's not just prison, but the police as a corporation, but policing. Policing. In this case, I'm trying to apply this to a word kind of reference of the intellectual industrial complex to say that we are also police. If we know theory of the oppressed, you know there is a theatrical form of theory of the oppressed that's called the cup in the head. All the disciplining, all of the ways that our body gets, stuck and controlled our imagination. So abolition is about understanding the structural forces that make our society value policing and death-driven system over life-sustaining systems. And in order to undo that, like Maria Makaba says, we need to look at the million experiments that people are doing like this one. Otherwise, we can never believe that it's possible. But if it's submerged and invisible, we don't see and we don't name, it seems like police in prison is the only thing, but they showed that it's not. You can do childcare instead. Because well, there's a lot of yes. Yes, abolish capitalism. So I'll just quickly use an image. So like Gibson Graham offers a very interesting image. And the image is that they say we live under capitalocentrism, meaning we only name, we only see, we only have a lens to name and see that which is considered economic and the economy under capitalist lenses and metrics. So, and it's like an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is the capitalist metrics. Formal labor, like, look, right? Boston and, all of that, passports. And then underneath you have slavery. Underneath you have barter systems. Underneath you have community economies. You have solidarity economies, right? You have co-ops. But if we don't change the lenses to see these economics, which I'm calling economics of abolition, because we need to abolish both the policing of our understanding and landscape of what economics is in the first place. So mutual aid projects is, it's part and parcel of envisioning abolitionist futures. That was long. It's a quick question. It's a small question with a lot of answers. Yes. How do I see that in City of God? I mean, I'm just the example of Lucian, just to be quick. She created this community child care center. She was the president also of the community bank. She was a leader organizing the housing. So that you understand the network, she used to do this in her home. It was called child care in her home. But in 1996, City of God flooded again. Because there's no sewage drainage, it's by the river, right? So when it floods, all the sewage goes back into homes. You can just imagine, right? To this day. So her home had like 2 meters of water and she had to move out. So in that time, that happened to many families. Hundreds of people died. Some families occupied this building. But when they were occupying this building, they're also, connecting all other social movements inside the favela and outside the favela to request housing projects. She was part of that movement. So when they moved out of this building, they already had a look at her and they were like, Renee, you need to come. right? They're safeguarding that public space for them. As soon as they had used it for housing, they were like, let's do it for the child care children, come, before anybody takes. She only got recognized as an institution recently because she had to petition for almost 20 years to be formally acknowledged because it was an occupation, so there is no address. And without address, you can have no legal claim over nothing. So she had put so much pressure for engineers and architects in the city to redesign so she could have an address, so she could get recognized as an institution, and then perhaps now even have partnerships with the city or other organizations. Thanks.
Yeah, really appreciate your presentation. I'm wondering how folks in the city of God deal with their safety and security when you have these militias and the cops themselves are coming after the people. How do they deal with that?
Yesterday, Luciana, my co-author, she was walking around trying to get some missing image use permission. And as she was telling me, I just came from this person's home, I was hearing. This was 3 p.m. Now, that was police operation. The community dreads police occupation more than they do their actual power system, because that power system is legible in some kind of way. It's legible because like Chilutina, she walks by, some of the kids she has taken care of are now part of, parallel organized forces. And when she walks by, they're like, and she's like, I know. If they do something happens to her, anything that happens, you have family members that you can go to. There's two different systems. One is dealing with the state, and the other one is dealing with the powers within. And the state is way more dangerous, is what every favela resident will tell you. Yeah? They come with no warrants. They break through people's home. They shoot, broad daylight. And interestingly enough, the Citibank, the Bank of Favela City of God, was the second of 4 Solidarity Economy Bank. And interestingly enough, the film helped justify that intervention because it was part of it was part of the entrepreneurial response to pacifying police unit. The pacifying police unit was police occupation of favelas in Rio. It was the most devastating public security experience we could ever imagine. So that's one way. Another way is that they have WhatsApp groups. WhatsApp is everything. WhatsApp, y'all, is everything. Because by the time the police comes over there, it's like there's 3,000 people knowing the pigs are coming, the pigs are coming. Plus community journalism, yeah. Yeah. Bolsonaro is a new Pentecostal evangelical, y'all. And I want to say that only, to follow up by saying some of these women are also evangelical. Both of them are. In fact, her sister is. Oops. So the merging of the entrepreneurial mentality is spiritual entrepreneurship or religious entrepreneurship. Like you go and you pray and, your business is going to thrive. Your mail is going to come back. You know what I mean? All of that's happening. But the fascist upsurge of conservatism finds fertile ground to grow there. And then you add that, you map upon that racism and religious racism, because these people, most of them have lived and survived as practitioners of Umbanda Candomblé. Because if you don't know, that's sort of the temple of practice of Afro-Brazilian religion. And that's the hub where migrants from all over the country going to cities like developing cities like São Paulo and Rio, the auntie, I call her auntie respectfully, Tia Preta, the black auntie, were the ones holding down this community. And they would come and be sheltered, fed, medicated, supported, counseled within Terreiros de Candomblé. That's the utmost community economy there is in that country. Can't get more solidarity economy than that. It's going to be destroyed. It's been under attack. And then you have the militia. The militia are corrupt police officers who are no longer in the corporation. It's not like some, no, they all come from a practice of state violence. So they're very well rehearsed, but no longer in the corporation. So the population dread them as much as they dread the police, because they come from the same breed. And they dread them less than the drug lords because they know there is logic and there is relationship in that territory. You don't get to be abused in your territory by, drug dealers. That doesn't happen. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this amazing question. Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Archie. Thank you.
This has been another episode of Thinking Social and Solidarity Economy. Please consider exploring our other episodes in this series, or take a look at episodes in our other series entitled Work, Learning, and Social Change. While you're at it, and if you're watching this on YouTube, keep up to date on the latest material by hitting that subscribe button.